My assumption now is that I am live, and we are indeed live in this, as Richard said, first ever Kayak Invitational League of Legends industry event. Okay, so welcome on my behalf. Richard already introduced me, so my name is Janus Pitkänen. I work at Kajak University of Applied Sciences as an esports lecturer and an event manager. And what can I say about Kajani? Well, past 3 days, it has been really great. It's 25 degrees, and now it seems that a storm is approaching. So this could be said. Um, this is also both. This is both metaphoric and actually quite literally. Thunder is approaching, as there is a thunderstorm rumbling somewhere in the distance, and I have a cat outside somewhere. So if there will be a heavy rain at some point, I will have to step out for a minute to get my cat. So please do excuse me should that happen. And yeah, today I will be talking to you about the stakeholders in the esports industry, and this also gives you kind of the idea how the esports industry looks like. And furthermore, I will be talking about the education we do here at KAMK. I might be able to say few words about education in general in esports. And wow, okay, that's a big rumble in the sky. So let's see what happens. Let's see also what happens here in the presentation. I totally forgot what I was about to say next. But we have a nice weekend coming, full of interesting industry speakers, interesting games. So yeah, I guess we can go right through the to the presentation. I have okay. This is what I was about to say is that I have too many slides and too little time, so we will be running through breezing through this PowerPoint. As I'm a lecturer, it's a PowerPoint styled presentation. Depending on the guys, how much they decide to show my face, how much they decide to show the presentation, that is up to them. But yes, so we will go first through the stakeholders in the esports industry, then some industry peculiarities, some fragmentation, what's generally happening in the industry, what's going to happen in the future, perhaps, and also the education we do here. So let's start so that we have actually time to go through everything. I hope the slides will change for you. If they don't, you can just show my face. All right. Stakeholders in the esports industry is the first one. And now you might be wondering, what is a stakeholder? Well, stakeholder is a stakeholder as a group. It's a group without whose support the organization would cease to exist. So it's a very important part. It's a someone who holds a stake at the industry, not the type of steak that you will eat in a restaurant, but actually like something is at stake. This will probably be the last joke I make in this broadcast because it didn't turn out to be as good as I thought it would. But it's also any group or individual who can affect or is affected by the achievement of the organization's objectives. This is very business heavy stuff. And for those who are not that keen on business, um, don't worry, there will be some interesting things here regarding at least the education. And since the business is out of the way after this, um, there will be perhaps more interesting topics. What could be more interesting than business? Nothing, of course. But can be categorized into two different stakeholder types. Well, surprise, surprise, primary and secondary. And these primary stakeholders in the esports industry are said to be older, and well, this is quite a fact that they are the older organizations or older actors, and the secondary ones are newer that have been emerging for the industry, some of them even quite lately. Primary stakeholders are also better established in the industry and they have a direct impact in the industry. And at this point, something that I forgot to say was that if you are a student of Guyana University of Applied Sciences, you probably have seen some of this slideshow before. Or if you have read Mr. Tobias Schultz's book on esports is business, like management in the world of competitive gaming, some of this stuff here will be quite um, familiar to you. and no one has been saying anything that my voice isn't, you're not hearing my voice, or the slide is not showing, so I assume that everything is going as planned. So yeah, secondary stakeholders are still trying to find their footing in the industry, so trying to find their place and establish themselves and their business models to kind of monetize the audience. So also these secondary stakeholders influence the primary stakeholders by bringing in money, opinions, and even sometimes some regulations. But as we know, and this will be said later on, mostly game developers own their intellectual property rights for all of their games. So basically, they pretty much have to say that what anyone can do with their games. So if they decide that only they themselves can host tournaments or play like host the tournaments and let the players play the game, they can decide on that themselves. So um, in many industries, the stakeholders are dependent on one another, and the esports industry is no exception of this. Older stakeholders are from early 2000s. So if you have followed the industry since and from there, you probably know of this. There are still some very established teams, for example, in Counter Strike, that may have started from Quake or and so on. But some of the oldest organizations have roots that go way, way back. Yeah, so they are dependent on one another. And in practice, this means that if you would have no title, then you would have no tournaments, no teams, and thus no audience, which would mean there would be no money to be made. And usually industry revolves around an audience in every industry, as well as in the esports industry. Um, there's an audience that you get the money from. They're interested people to pay for interesting content and tickets and all that. So primary stakeholders have more direct contribution in the value chain network. Um, and the primary stakeholders are the game developers. So as I said before, they are the ones who, well, as the name states, develop and make the games. So most notable ones, you can probably also name a few of these, but there's Valve, there's Riot Games, all of these. There are bigger ones, and of course there are smaller ones, but nevertheless they own their own games since they are the ones who have made them. Then there are tournament organizers such as ESL, PGL. You can also probably name a few of these yourself as well. Just giving a few examples, and we're not going too deep into the stakeholders as a group, like since we don't really have the time here today. Professional teams. Some of you watchers probably have a team that you root for. Maybe it's your own team. Maybe you're a player in the team, but maybe on a bigger scale, there's like let's say if you're a League of Legends players and you're aspiring professionals, you probably have like an idol in some kind of team, and this will bring us to the professional players. So professional players are in these professional teams, and these professional teams try to guarantee the players the optimal circumstances to get better in their games. So yeah, you probably have favorite teams, favorite players, which you probably follow on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Well, basically anywhere. It's easy to follow people through the social media. There are providers and communities as well. Then, as the secondary stakeholder group, which has not more indirect contribution, the value chain network, because the whole thing in the esports industry, of course, is trying to create value for all the stakeholders in the industry, and of course for the audience. So the value creation is very central in every industry, of course. So the esports industry is no exception in this regard. So even though they have the indirect contribution, it doesn't mean that they don't have an impact on the industry. They might, quite the opposite, have quite big of an impact as well. But these are, for example, governing bodies, and governing bodies such as the Esports Federations. Depending on where you're watching this from, if you're watching from Finland, we have the Finnish Esports Federation. If you're watching from Sweden, you have the Swedish counterpart or equivalent of the Finnish Esports Federation. I guess quite many countries nowadays do have these federations who try to promote the esports and kind of make it more known to the general public. As it is, even though esports is very trendy nowadays, it's still, in the eyes of general public, maybe not seen as appealing as some other industries or sports. And that takes us to sports businesses. So not sure if you've seen, but in the esports industry, there is kind of like this intake of sports, um, sports businesses from traditional sports. So I think in 2006, this comes from my memory, there were like 15-ish like sports organizations, traditional sports organizations that had representation in esports, and now there are hundreds of those. So, for example, here in Finland, most of my examples are from the Finnish industry, since I've been following that more keenly lately and how it has developed. But most of the not okay, let's not say most of the, but quite some of the Finnish like national hockey teams have a representation in their respective game, which is the NHL. Um, so they have esports kind of representation there. Same goes for some of the football clubs, and this is the same in some of the bigger, like bigger on a bigger scale as well. Like the Premier League, I think they have like their football players as well in esports. So they play the virtual version of their own game. Then, of course, sponsors. You shouldn't forget the sponsors, and we in the Kajak Invitational, Richard, well presented them in the beginning. So thanks to sponsors, this is all possible. Bigger sponsors, smaller sponsors, but sponsors are very important for the industry. And we will discuss this a bit later, but they are perhaps a bit too important for the industry. But again, I guess this is partly a question of opinion. Of course, there are public investors who want to invest in the space. Esports is the new mega trend, and okay, at least very trendy phenomenon, and people want to put their money in the fear of missing out. That we don't want to miss out on this esports because it's believed that it's the like the spearhead of the future entertainment. It's going to be the biggest entertainment um, there is in maybe few decades. We shall see. Of course, entrepreneurs, starting ones, and those who just enter the field, those have been seen to enter the industry, or like rise up in the industry. And there are media businesses who want to exploit their like this media space that is like, because esports is very media heavy, especially in the social media, and it's very attractive. There's a lot of visibility there. So the media businesses also want to get into esports, and young people are very interested in esports. So of course, media businesses have to go where um, young people also go. And then there are, of course, shareholders, people who want to buy shares from esports companies and want to kind of invest. So this is also a bit more related to the investors. But let's look at little closer at the characteristics of these esports stakeholders. And in the beginning, the esports organizations were mostly esports teams or clans trying to find sponsors. So it can be said that the industry was created by the stakeholders coming from within the industry. So um, in the very beginning, the it was a bit hard to prove your worth for the sponsors in the form of reliable numbers or success. It might still be, but in the beginning it was especially hard. And there was actually a little collaboration between organizations outside the industry in the beginning, but this is fairly normal. And esports is an emerging industry still, even though it might feel like if you're an industry veteran, you might feel like it has been there for many years. But yes, luckily there is now more collaboration. And the fundamental characteristics are that people, these fundamental characteristics were identified or distinguished by Mr. Schultz and Mr. Stein in their research 2017. So my material and everything is pretty much always based on sources, articles, scientific things. So unfortunately, if you cannot see that very well in this presentation, I can try to give you, should you ask later, I can maybe give you more in-depth um, sources for all that's written here. But yes, so people involved in esports are highly focused on goal setting. I have like separate slides for all of these, so we will soon know what they mean. The market's orientation is truly local. Esports are oriented towards change. Resources are allocated in a bottom-up fashion. Participants are over-energetic, over-enthusiastic, and over-dynamic. And digitalization is integral to esports. You might have a vague idea what all of these things mean, but we will still, however, go through them. And this is something that shapes the industry. These characteristics of esports stakeholders are really important in the way the industry is shaped, and you should really understand these to know how to operate in the industry. So people in the people in esports are highly focused on goal setting. So this means that teams and players aim to be the best. This is not just setting a goal, but the goals are usually very high. You do try and you do a lot of work to reach your goals. And this kind of goal setting mentality might transfer from within the game. Like if you play a competitive game, might transfer from there into the outside. So if you're a player, then you become an entrepreneur. You kind of still have this high emphasis on this goal setting that, okay, now that I'm an entrepreneur, maybe I'm in the media business, I want to deliver the best possible experience for the fans and viewers, or if you're an event manager. So as you can see, the high product quality in this Kajak Invitational, this is also us trying to deliver the best possible experience for fans and viewers. Still, um, there are usually things that can be done better, and of course you should always aim to be better. This is also one part of the goal setting. So constantly seeking out new ideas and concepts for the sake of improvement, both in and out the game. So whatever you do it well, learn from your mistakes, and do better next time. So this is how it should be, and this is not only in the esports industry. This is something that you should also, this is a good I guess advice for life. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are there to learn. You learn from the mistakes. And not all the innovations in the industry need to be radical, but there can be minor process innovations as well. And now you probably have to read a bit about like innovations and innovation management, but we're not going to go there anyway. But as an example, this could be like a minor process innovation could be called in practice. It could be it could be new tactics in game. Because a game is a process, you go through it, and then you might you change something, you change tactics, you change the process as well. But yeah, okay. Then the market orientation is truly global. Now someone may ask, aha, you made a typo. Lulit should be global, but no, 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 no. I assure you, it's the global is a real word used here. I guess it's a made up word for this, but it still is um, can be used here. It means that the mindset of esports is global, and the games are played and followed globally. But events are locally organized. And even though people attend from all over the world, you need venues, you need the places to have the tournaments. Okay, there are exceptions that you can have fully global event as well, but then it has to be online. Of course, it's still physically broadcasted and done somewhere. So in that sense, it's also true. The global thinking, it's also true in this case. But yeah, games are broadcasted all over the world for them to be followed globally. This event is no exception. So we hope to get as many global viewers as possible. So in esports, we exist in two spaces, both real and virtual. And this means at the same time that in the esports industry, the companies there are also positioned in both worlds. So it's a great thing that even though we are here in desolate middle of nowhere, we have great network infrastructure, and we can attend numerous events online. So globally, we can be very much present, even though the local area is maybe not that esports heavy. Esports are oriented towards change. So this comes from the idea that when something doesn't work, you change it. And within esports games, if you play them competitively, well, and if even if you don't, the games usually have kind of a puzzle that you need to solve, and you need to constantly adjust to the situation at hand. So you would need to in competitive video games like Counter-Strike, League of Legends, anything, you need to adjust your opponents. So you need to play your opponent, not yourself. You're not like an individual chess piece there doing whatever you want, but you need to take into account what your team does and what the enemy team does and try to outplay your opponent. So this kind of tenacity might come from the games to the business world and keep changing things until you succeed, and it's a strategy of trial and error, and it's commonly employed in esports companies. And when you find something that works, you should exploit it to the fullest. And it can be said also that exploitation and exploration happen simultaneously. So you might not what works, but if you see, this seemed to work, then of course continue using it. Then again, resources are allocated in a bottom-up fashion, means that there is still no central authority today. This was something that was said in the beginning, that the game developers own their games. They own the intellectual property rights for their games and thus can decide whatever is done with their IPRs. And but it's still good that the game developers have decided, in many cases, decided to listen to the community. This might also be the case because there are so many game developers. There's competition of the players and all that. So if you listen to the players, you tend probably to get more of the players since you're hearing them out, and you might make the game more enjoyable. In the beginning stages, and not even not now, but when the esports was coming up, there was no one authority to distribute the resources. So there was this kind of decentralized network contributing own resources to anyone to everyone's benefit. So if you know esports, is you get the resources from different sponsors, different actors in the field. Maybe the game developers take part in it, and maybe the tournament organizers put some of their own money in these. So there is not one like a big um, association or federation that, okay, we have this pool of money and this pool of money goes there. So it doesn't come from like from the up down, but it comes rather from the starts from the very bottom of those who wanting to develop the industry. And yeah, so game designers, game developers have a lot of power, and they're still listening to the community. And esports is not forced, so the players can choose what games they play. And as I said before, listening to the players also benefits usually the game developers. Then again, participants are over energetic, over enthusiastic, and over dynamic. This means that the esports media sphere is filled with actors driven by passion and dedication. And this doesn't only mean the companies, but all of the actors, including the customers. So it all means that people who are involved in esports, since we are still relatively small, like compared to like the gaming industry, like video game industry, like esports is now at the revenue of 1 billion, but like the game industry itself is it's like 150 billion or something like that. The sports industry is 500 billion or something like that. So there is esports is still really really small compared to only this. So the people working on this, um, and in this, well, of course, depends where you compare it, but comparedly, small industry want to kind of jointly push the industry forward and to new heights. So it's the dynamic esports environment comes from the people involved. You watching there, me speaking here, and so on. And as entrepreneurial innovators, um, by Gray, 1978. The traits in esports, this is a theory made by Mr. Gray. So the traits in esports seem to follow the way of proving themselves by being over energetic, over enthusiastic, and over dynamic. Of course, esports wasn't at this time, but this is just like a theory put in to an esports context. Then again, digitalization is integral to esports. So of course, this the digitalization happens in every industry. Every industry is digitalizing their activities, and for esports, esports is born kind of digital. So and the growth is very heavily linked with the growth of technology infrastructure and more precisely the internet. Um, and virtual teams, even the international ones, have existed in the esports space since the very beginning. And key organizations, teams, tournament operators, infrastructure providers, and communities are included in this. And if we go back way back into any industry, there was very little virtual collaboration. People had to go for meetings to go out and maybe fly to another city, and like before the internet, everything was seen as I guess people were moving more like kind of physically, but did it make things harder? Maybe. It's good to see people, but then again, during thanks to the internet infrastructure today, you can meet people all over the world in one day through the internet. And even in esports, the virtual collaboration um, wasn't that common in the early stages. Yeah, it might be. This might be also regarding the internet infrastructure. Not all the um, countries have the same infrastructure, and maybe the companies couldn't use the internet to its fullest potential until a bit later. But still, virtual collaboration is very common nowadays in esports and in any other industry as well. Okay, so As a summary for the stakeholders, we can say that people in esports are very committed not only to the employer but to the industry as well. And then improving organizational assets while being globally networked and connected at all times is very common. Clash between esports industry and traditional industries will influence the development of esports in the future. A bit more about that soon. And everyone in the esports field generally wants that the industry does well, even though there are rivalries within the industry. So it's a benefit for everyone if the industry um, is developing and gaining more revenue. But there are a few things that are very peculiar in this industry, and we will go through them now. Sorry, my cable seems to be somehow scuffed. Okay, good. Would have need some water here. So, okay, some industry peculiarities. One thing is that people have been thinking at like there's a study by Rosa and Jeremy in 2018, and it says what is esports or esports? What is it, and is it real? And there were a few kind of peculiar things in esports, and I think we've covered this in our classes and lectures as well. For those who have attended my lectures before, is that how to create a sustainable business model leading to the steady stream of revenue. So, for example, there are significantly lesser revenues compared to traditional sports fans. So, this is an average sports fan um, spends $54, if I'm not mistaken, a year for sports related accessories, merchandise, and all this. And the same for esports was only $1.8. And at the same time, money is also being burned on esports growth while hoping that this kind of magical business model will emerge to create the return on investment. People are, of course, going back to the previous one, are buying new gear constantly. So they buy new mouse pads, keyboards, um, what's it this called? Monitors. That's the one I'm looking. It's a monitor. So, but this is compared to the like organizations and teams who sell merchandise and try to monetize. So mostly the people in esports who make money like selling monitors, mice, and all these that I just described are the ones also sponsoring the industry. So they kind of give money out to get the money back in. So yes, that's good for them. But for if you are you can now think yourself that if you are a fan of an esports team or organization, how much money do you kind of put into their merchandise or their specific gear in a year? Maybe it's more than 1.8, but there are so many people watching, so many viewers. Depends on your monetary situation as well. Like if you're a student, you might not be able to put that much money. And this is the also one of the industry peculiarities that people watching esports are very young. They might not have income yet, or they have very little income. They might be students. So this is also something that we can expect. Maybe this kind of revenue um, rise when the industry matures and the people following the industry also mature at the same time. Maybe they have kids who are interested in this, so then the parents have money to put into these things. Um, yeah, sometimes you might think that esports teams and their values are dubious and have such just somehow appeared. Of course, there's a calculation behind that, but there are very prominent esports teams. But for some, it might feel that you value a team to be worth $500 million, for example. It might feel a bit disputable in a sense that the money the company isn't probably making a lot of profit, so it feels a bit weird. Why is it that valued? Of course, there are dozens and dozens of followers, visibility, The sponsorship agreements, of course, are worth a lot of money, but still. And yeah, so this is something that has been, if you have followed the industry, it's been talked that is esports a bubble? Is there going to be a bubble? It's going to burst at some point. But thing is that majority of esports organizations still fail to create a sustainable business model out of the huge investment put into them. So what happens if you invest into a company that doesn't make profit? Well, if you go to any traditional industry, non-trending one, the company goes under. But still, since we're a relatively new industry and everything is, we're still exploring what's happening and what's going on, and it's maturing at some point. So it's good to invest now. And if you want to invest in investments, you usually take a few hits until you succeed. And people will. What I believe is that esports is here to stay. So people will watch other people play video games, and maybe the next big thing is mobile esports. So we shall see. It's an interesting industry as it is developing really rapidly. But yeah, so regarding this bubble issue and the industry, is a danger that the industry is overheating, meaning that when the investors are fearing that they're going to miss out, since according to some sources, it has been said to be the next big thing, or it's already a big thing, but the next biggest entertainment industry in the world. Of course, you want to invest now, because then you can reap the benefits later. And money is a systemic risk which can be tackled by professional strategic management and discussing about business models. So I feel like the industry isn't doing this enough yet. I mean, some of them are, and there are some profitable businesses in esports as well. And few developmental trends in esports affecting the future is that the popularity of franchising will impact the way esports titles interact with esports market. There will be new markets and new frontiers to explore, and esports industry will probably have even more stakeholders coming up, and it will be even more fragmented now. Um, let's talk about the new markets and the fragmentation a bit, and then move on to the education part, which I will say a few words about our education. Um, or our education possibilities. Oh, this wasn't actually, it seems that this slide wasn't, didn't have any animations, but no worries. So there are a lot of undeveloped markets in esports and a lot of regional growth differences. Whereas the North America is having trouble filling the arenas, there is a lot of enthusiastic audience in China. And whereas Europe is trying to prove their strategic management in the found business models. So we are in a bit different situations depending on the continents we live in. Are the numbers reliable? So Fnatic versus IG, a League of Legends. Oh God, it wasn't last Worlds. It was the one prior to that. But it said there was an audience of 200 million people watching. But it can be argued that without the Chinese audience, how many people would have watched that? Because China is a bit of a closed system. You might not know what's happening there, and there seems to be a lot of viewers, a lot of people there. This is not entirely accurate. That was written here, but the point here is that um, the Chinese audience is big. Then there are Chinese corporations that are essential for game developers. So Tencent, as you know, owns Riot, and the Tencent is becoming more and more dominant in a lot of fields, movies, video games, and this can be seen in Riot Games' actions, since Riot Games is now developing They had the first game is League of Legends. Then there was nothing for a long time. There was nothing, but then there was the Legends of Runeterra, then the TFT, then Valorant, and now there's a fighting game coming up. Soon there probably will be an RTS. So I guess this is kind of the dominance that is said like coming from the game developers and from Tencent. So yeah, this isn't timed, and I guess the rest aren't timed because I didn't have enough time to prepare. I only had like um, 5 weeks or something like that. But yeah, it's a obvious mistake. But still, for new markets, Japan and countries in Southeast Asia, it's ideal for esports because generally it's a great infrastructure and a young demographic. And Japan is a homeland of video games. They have the infrastructure and the people, but for whatever reason, no thriving esports industry. It's I guess Nintendo is now okay. I won't say anything about Nintendo. Let's just move forward. So, but I see Japan growing as an industry at some point as well, especially in terms of fighting games. Um, South Korea could be seen as the developer for the esports in Southeast Asia, so it would help to foster their own markets as well. Because currently, I guess I would say South Korea has pretty saturated esports market, which is kind of weird for such a young industry. But League of Legends and StarCraft seem to be the ones that the games that are most played there. And mobile gaming growth may change the situation in the global south. Um, for example, India, not a lot of people have computers, but everyone has a cell phone. So expect a lot of mobile gamers from there. And mobile gaming itself will most likely grow a lot. It's important to understand regional markets and adapting to cultural specific is necessary for entry to new markets. This is not something that's esports specific. This is something that this is basic business ideology, adapting to the cultures of some countries. So yeah, and globally there is still space to grow. Fragmentation. So this means that there is a certain limit of audience per game. Some people will stick, some people won't, and there will be more and more and more video games and competitive titles in the future, and there is a certain limit of audience per game. So initially when there's a new game launch, there are more, like I guess was seen in the in Valorant. So a lot of people from different FPS jumped into Valorant, but how many of them stuck with Valorant, I'm not sure, but I would say at least some of them went back to their original games like Rainbow Six or Counter Strike. And industry may grow even though the games may saturate because there is no limit to titles. No one can limit how many esports titles there can be. There can be 8 competing FPS titles that are fairly popular at some point. And the more titles there are, there will be less power for the game developers. This is what is meant by fragmentation. And this is, I think, to some extent, a good thing. In future, esports expect to be more and more diverse. It's supposed to say diverse. It says fivers, and this is not this is not a word that someone has come up with for this. It should be diverse. So there's a typo. But there's increasing competition, increasing need of sustainable, and increasing. This will increase the need of sustainable business models within the esports business model network, and um, potentially there will be business model networks for distinct esports titles in the future. Okay, I think I have like 10 minutes, so you will have a student panel later. So let's quickly go through about the esports and education here at KAMK. Esports education in Finland has been growing, and there are a lot of um, secondary level institutions that have started have taken esports into their curriculums to some extent. Now, um, Of course, Kajaani University of Applied Sciences is already the tertiary level, and we are the only ones in Finland offering this esports business, like the bachelor's degree, fully on focused on esports. Of course, there are traditional business courses in this as well, but education-wise, it is also developing in many countries. A lot of people are interested in this phenomenon, and people are thinking that should it be part of the PE classes, like the physical education classes in schools. So some people would get introduced to football, but there would be also option to get introduced to esports, and this would probably be a good idea as well. Yeah, so a few words about what we have. Not sure how in depth this will be later on, but the planned duration of studies is 3.5 years, equals to 210 credits. Number of study places per year is 20-ish. If you read it somewhere, I think it says 15 study places, but um, it has been a quite popular. There have been a popular demand for a lot of applications from the students or aspiring students, so we have taken more than the 15. It's free of charge. Of course, there are tuition fees for non-EU/ETA um, people coming from non-EU or ETA countries, and that's 6,000 a year, which can then be halved by various means, but those will be explained to you should you ever want to apply. No, that sounds bad. Of course, you want to apply. So you will get a Bachelor of Business Administration qualification from which you can then go to do your master's in anywhere. So basically, you get the bachelor's qualification, which is just great. So our aim is to produce qualified professionals for the esports industry, and as you see, this is the Kajak Invitational is a student-run thing. As you can see, we have already made our students. I take full credit, so we've already made our students very professional and very qualified people. But still, they need to do a bit more to get the study certificate. And of course, our purpose is not to discontinue careers of any aspiring professional players. So we would like to bring more depth also for professional players, should they want to come and study, or should they want to think like a plan B as a study. And the main application period is every January. The dates vary a bit, but it's on January. Okay. Quickly, some of the structure of the studies. And first year is basic studies, marketing, accounting, basic of esports industry, something that we've just gone through. Second year, there are professional studies and modules related to coaching, athlete development, management, event management. And third year studies are more professional studies and thesis. And the fourth year is a practical training. Okay, so what we also have is we have an esports classroom with high-end rigs. They were high-end 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, but don't worry, there will be new ones. There will be new ones, even if there is an agreement that we will get from a certain period of time, we will get new high-end gaming PCs for the classroom. And we have exchange possibilities all over the world. If you should you want to study somewhere else than here. Previously, our students have been going to Great Britain, but also to Japan and South Korea as well. So we have esports studies offered at our partner at Staffordshire, and that is in the Great Britain. But yeah, we have a lot of possibilities for exchange. A lot of projects to take on, a lot of industry speakers to spice things up. It's something we do. This is also part of the student I think it started from a student project, and students are completing projects also here during this Kajak Invitational, and by organizing this, it's also kind of part of their studies. Esports teams that are student run are competing in various games and leagues. So should you want to try and play in a structured team, that can be possible. I'm not promising anyone a spot in our very high level teams, but it's a possibility. And we have an Esports Club here, which organizes activities for people outside the esports degree. So basically for everyone, there are events organized every week. Also part of the degree and projects. Last slide. Ugh, how much do I have time? I still have 5 minutes. Maybe I can take a few questions after this. So we have Wakatiruka Sports Academy, known for their ability to raise professional athletes. If you know cross-country skiing, we've had a few champions graduating from Wakatiruka Sports Academy. It's basically a place where you can do sports and study at the same time. And it's a secondary level institute. We have Kaisnet, a local internet service provider with interest in esports activities. We have a Critical Force, a game developer with a mobile competitive FPS called Critical Ops. Check that out if you like Counter-Strike. It feels quite a lot like Counter-Strike 1.6, but it's made on mobile. And we have a Garde Party, which is a local tournament and event organizer specialized in LAN events with esports competitions. So this is kind of more or less of a shout out to the regional esports activities and the stakeholders here. And that's it for the presentation. I cannot see if there are any questions anywhere. I haven't been able to answer anything, but if anyone can read out loud some questions for me, I'm more than happy to.
And then, can you hear me?
Sure.
Please unmute
Yes.
yourself on the Discord so I can hear you. Lovely. Hello. Make it known. Oh, now I can hear you. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you very much for the insightful information. You did the true marathon. You almost filled your full hour, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect. So I guess now we can take some questions from chat. Let me just pull it up here. I believe some came throughout your presentation, but all right, let's see. All right, from Spoke Noki, our fearless leader here at Kajak Esports, he said, you mentioned innovation management. Does it exist in KAMK? What are recent innovations we have had in the esports degree?
Oh, well, I guess the esports degree itself is quite innovative, but if you want to take on innovation management studies, unfortunately, we don't have a majoring subject in Kajani, so you would have to look a bit further into maybe some other regions that might offer that. And maybe as a shout out, I can say that at least Lappeenranta University of Technology has some good innovation management, or had some good innovation management in um, at least a few years back.
Okay, very good. So if anyone has any other questions, please write them in the chat, but I can go to a question that was submitted previously from our followers. I guess in recent weeks or so, there's been some news around education in esports with everything that's going on with these certificates and such, and it's sort of even further stigmatized the topic of education in esports. Do you have any thoughts on that, or how do you see what is being done at KAMK with the esports business degree and other universities such as Stratfordshire that are offering these full degrees? How do you see how that separates from these online offerings and these certificates?
Well, yes, this is a very good question. I mean, of course, you should always be able to trust in the kind of qualifications you had. Something that has been there priorly, like universities have been there for a long time, and then if they start something new, you can trust the quality because it's a university and they have like a certain criteria. Whereas if there is a sudden pop up of just someone offering you a qualification in anything, not only in esports, but
Hmm.
in anything, I advise you to take a real like close look on what is offered and who is offering it and what is the organization behind the offering. Then you can kind of more maybe see if it is legit or
Hmm.
not.
Okay, perfect. So make sure you're doing these background checks on anything
Yes.
that you're doing online. That's, I think, good advice. Spoke in the chat, said he was talking about innovations related to the university that are integrated in the studies. So have any innovations been made at the university regarding what is being taught here, or how it's being taught, I guess?
Hmm. Well, quite a lot. Well, in terms of like my personal way of teaching and having these lectures, I've learned a lot on how to teach. So minor teaching innovations or ways to teach for myself at least, and the way the teaching can be done in a sense that you can have these projects and we have shaped a lot like according to feedback from the students that how they would like to what they would like to see in their studies, and that has helped us to innovate and steer the studies towards something that are more favorable for not only for us as a university but also for the students in their for their working life.
Okay, perfect. So we've seen that as well as students ourselves, that our insight and feedback that we give to the university and the degree is actually taken into account, and relevant changes are made. So that's always great to see.
Yes, we need to focus still more on that.
Mhm.
So it's still not perfect, but we still need to we had a feedback that we need to focus more on giving the feedback from the feedback.
Yes,
So that is
the
something
feedback
that
on the
it's not
feed.
always easy. You just get the feedback and then you do something and then you forget that you're supposed to say that, oh hey, that was a good feedback and we did this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, well, we're reaching the end of the time here, so I guess I can give you one more just general question about the esports industry. As you are doing a lot of research in the space, obviously as the program coordinator of the esports business degree, do you see any opportunities in the industry? So for those who are looking to get into esports now or are graduating from this degree, they're entering the space, do you see any opportunities, like avenues where topics are missing or there's professionals needed in certain areas of the esports industry? Because of course, some are very highly, there's a lot of people trying to get into them, but is there any areas that are lacking these professionals?
Well, I would say that there is definitely, as I said, there is definitely room in the esports industry for development. And depending on where you go to work after graduation, it depends on the existing business model of
Mm-hmm.
the company that you go into, how well you can integrate esports. For example, we, as Kayan University of Applied Sciences, we're not integral to esports in any way. We are integral to education, so
Mm-hmm.
we've taken esports as part of our business model.
Yep.
So kind of figuring out how to get the most out of esports and how to do it well according to your existing business, that
Mm-hmm.
is the key. There's a lot of room in the marketing, there's a lot of room in well, kind of supporting the industry, but then integrating esports wherever you might work to the company's business model so that it makes it the company more profitable. That's the key issue, I would say, and that would help the business models in general in esports as well as the companies that you work for. So it would benefit everyone, the industry and the companies, and well, needless to say, you if you
Mm-hmm.
kind of can figure out what it could be.
Okay, perfect. That makes